Hi, my name's Dave, and I've spent most of my life outdoors here in Canada's Western Frontier. I believe one thing to be true: outside is therapy. It's where we both reconnect and disconnect. I hope you come with me as we build, explore, and repeat. All right, ladies and gents, welcome back. It's been, how many days? 3 or 4 days since the last video. And I'm not gonna lie, I have slowed down a bit in my plans. I was trying to rush everything into like a 3-week period, and that was just foolish because I make poor life choices. So I've decided to slow down a little bit and focus on some other things that needed focusing on. So today marks a big day for us because we're about to start the cutting and the install of the Coastal Offroad rear bumper. If you guys haven't already seen the unboxing of this video where I kind of go through how it comes to you, go over to the previous video and that'll kind of show you at the end where we installed a Yucatan camper on a Dodge Ram, and then at the end of the day we kind of went through the Coastal stuff. So the goal for the weekend is to get the truck ready for Jordan on Monday, in which we'll drop it off at Jordan on Monday. He's going to do all of our welding over at New Fab. He's going to do all of the coating. So although this is a semi-DIY build for the Coastal Offroad rear bumper, I'm going to show you guys exactly how much it costs to pay for the bumper and then have it professionally made and coated professionally. We're going to break down the costs for you guys. We're going to do the install from beginning to end. I'm going to show you guys exactly what you need to remove, how to remove it. We're going to go through the process of assembling the bumper through and through with Jordan. And then at which point we will deal with the lid on Sunday. And that's what we're going to do. It's time to get down to brass taxes here. We're going to get our work clothes on and then we're going to jump into it. So let's do it. Okay. So to remove the bumper on your Nissan Frontier, what you're going to need is a 3/4 inch drive, ratchet drive, right? And a 19 mil socket. I'm going to recommend the multi-point. I think this is a 12-point socket. The difference between a 12-point socket and a standard hex socket is going to be the amount of surface connection that you have. So as you can see, this one's kind of ribbed and this one looks like the head of a nut or a bolt. You're going to see that this thing is pretty rusted. It's been in there for a long time, and you're going to have a lot of thread work to get that thing out. So in the event you were to use one of these, there's a good chance that this is going to slip. Whereas if you put this guy on, you're not going to slip at all. So you're not going to mesh up the contact surface of your bolt here, and you're not going to bash your knuckles into the sides of the truck like every one of us gear wrencher pullers do all the time, and you'll keep your hands looking nice. So to break these loose, again, you're going to use a ton of force. So a 12-point socket with a nice breaker bar. So this is a breaker bar. This one's about, I think, 36 inches long. That's what you're going to pull out. 6 bolts in total. And you're going to pull those guys, and I'm not too sure. I have to go through the instructions again, but I'm not sure if we're using the existing hardware or not. First, you're going to pull all of these bolts here. So these 3, and then the 3 on the other side, and then the bumper should just kind of come right down. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave 2 of these bolts in just a little ways past hand tight. And what that'll do is keep the bumper from falling down on me as I'm pulling the rest of this hardware Okay, so now that that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to go through and make sure we're not missing any connections. Make sure that we don't have any electrical connections that are hanging onto the bumper. A lot of times what will happen is there'll be small plastic clips that get attached to your bumper, and that's what the factory will use to run their wiring through. So we're going to make sure that that's off. This bumper has never come off before, except for when it was Linexed years ago. So I suspect this will be a bit of work to get off, and then it's going to kind of come crashing down to the floor. Thankfully, we've got some boards down and we're over our pit, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. But I'm going to go and pull this guy off now and see how much of a pain in the ass it's going to be to get off. Got some pry bars if need be, but I think with some rattling and some shaking, it'll come off relatively easy. So. Oh yeah, might work. So this is where we're at right now. Unfortunately, some of the hardware was so corroded and rusted into the factory welded square nuts. So inside of the frame rail where the hitch assembly bolts up into the frame rail, they have these square, these welded square T-nuts. Show you guys this guy here, and these are spot welded, as you can see, into the bottom of that frame rail. Now I don't know if that's going to cause us some issues. I think it probably will, because I've had to bash 2 of these out, and that's the 2 bolts that we actually had to cut. All the parts and pieces for this bumper are already over at Jordan's, so we're not going to be able to put anything up right now as a test piece. But we will move on to cutting the sides of the frame of the truck box, all the way around there on both sides. We're gonna go through our instructions now that we're halfway through our work. So now we're gonna look at the instructions. So, Coastal Offroad sends you instructions for everything that you're gonna buy. One thing I will say is that I wish they would provide you with a color printout of this, because they do go through, and within their instructions they say things like you know, circled in green or circled in red or highlighted in green or highlighted in red, and you don't necessarily know what's been highlighted or what they're pointing at if it's not printed out in color. That's the only thing I have to say about the instruction manual itself. All of the factory M12 hardware is reusable. Otherwise, these can be sourced at your local automotive hardware store. So there you go, guys. We are expected to reuse hardware, but again, as you can see, we will not be reusing this hardware. It is just too far gone, and that's just not going to work for us. So to achieve the maximum possible amount of ground clearance and protection, this bumper requires that the rear corners of the bed sides be cut. This can be done using a cutting disc or a standard 4 or 5 inch angle grinder. If you guys are watching this video, it's a good chance you've already watched Hard Enduro's video of this bumper that he did for his truck. And he did, in fact, do a really good video for this. So I would actually recommend, if you haven't seen that you pair that with this video if you're doing it yourself and you kind of know what you can expect. I suspect we'll get away with just using the 4.5 inch angle grinder with a Sawzall. So we'll see what happens here on the next step. The truck will be slightly higher in the front or the rear. So use a floor jack and jack up the truck unit until it is level. So this is what the instructions say. Here's the point. If we are going to mark this, we're going to mark it 1.5 inches down from the tailgate. But here's the thing. Your tailgate may or may not be identical on this corner and this corner for a myriad of reasons. Another thing that the instructions tell us is that that 1.5 inch mark is equal to this black lip. So there's a black lip that protrudes on the inside of the tailgate down a little bit, and it looks to be about 1.5 inches down. This is the line that we're talking about right here. So what you want to do is, if you can't get the same measurement from your tailgate, you're going to put a nice straight edge along this line and match the lower edge of that straight edge with the bottom edge of that lip like this, right? Just like that, okay? And then you're going to bring that all the way to the end, right? So you're going to bring it out like this and butt it up against the inside ledge of this. Then you're going to take a Sharpie marker, and making sure that this doesn't move, you're going to run your Sharpie marker along the bottom edge of that straight edge. The next step you're going to want to do is you're going to want to transfer that line that you made along this line to the inner lip of the truck coming towards the back. So for that, you're going to want a speed square. You're going to run your line that way. Okay? And that's going to bring that line this way. And then again, you're going to repeat the step on the other side. The next step is probably the most important, because it's going to be the cut that people are going to see the most. So this step is going to take a lot of care and attention and a lot of measurement. Measure as many times as you think you need to before you could put the grinder to it, because once it's cut, it's cut. If you're doing this for the first time and you've never done a mod like this, I'm going to encourage you actually to make your cut lower than you think it needs to be, and then fit your bumper up that way. Do your best to make sure that the cut is done well. What we're going to do is we are going to put a jack on the front. We're going to lift the front up so that it matches, so that it's level. We're going to put a bubble level on the tailgate. And then you're going to come over the box rail. So you're basically extending the box rail out so that you have a nice hook that you can run your tape measure to, and then come down. Make a couple marks after you marked it along here, here, and here. And that's going to give you a template to run your tape along so you can get a nice line. So let's get the jack underneath. We'll jack it up. We'll make sure we're level. And we'll go from there. All right, guys. So there we go. We got our bubble level on the bed rail of the truck right there. We're going to transfer that line over without screwing it up too. Make the same measurement, 3/4. Okay, and the last line is going to be right behind the tire. And that's going to be 22. Okay. And then we're going to cut on the line. All right, guys, so this is it. This is the moment, okay? Before you cut, you would have pulled your rear bumper, you would have pulled your hitch assembly off, cutting and making a note of anything that you have to replace when you go to foot the bumper back up. Then you've leveled your truck out with a bubble level, and you've made your marks on the outside of the box on the rear where you're going to make your cut. Then you've gone through and you've added your tape line all the way across. Then you've gone into the wheel well where your tire sits, and you've continued that tape line all the way in. And you're going to start your cut. You're going to go slow and smooth. You don't need to go fast. Just stay on your line and get into whatever comfortable position you can stay in the longest without having to consistently readjust. Because if you have to pull your grinder away and then put your grinder back in, you're going to be starting a new cut, and there might be a divot there. So try to get into a position when you're on the ground, or better on a hoist, where you can just run that grinder along that line as best as you can. So you're at the point of no going back now. You're ready to make the cut. Let's do it. One thing I forgot to mention on the Nissan Frontier specifically, your rear taillight harness is going to sit low inside of your box rail. So you're going to want to make absolutely sure that you don't cut through your taillight harness. So reach up under there, get a zip tie, and tuck it up there nice and tight. This is as stressful as it looks. What we've encountered now is that we're at a 90-degree bend. So where we made that mark and we draw that line to meet it, that's where we're at right now. In behind that is a box support. I think I'll have to get the reciprocating saw for that. It is the next day, and we took longer than expected and longer than probably is advised even to make our cuts yesterday, but they are all done. The truck is ready for fit up. We did make a couple of boo-boos, so we're gonna have to bring the truck in today and repair those. Okay, well, it's late. I slept in today, so we gotta get going, so let's get her done. All right, so what we're gonna do now is repair the wiring that we damaged yesterday while we were doing our cut. Again, just remember that always pull your lights, or at the very least reach up under there and tuck in any of those wires so that you don't make the same mistake I did. I checked that side, no problem. I got a little too far in the cut on this side, and I just hood it. I felt some resistance on the grinder, and I felt that's probably what it was. So here we are. We're going to reconnect all the wires, and we're going to test the lights. So let's get that done. One thing to bear in mind when you're putting together your parts is just to make sure that you lay them out and number them so that as you start putting them together, you can kind of just pull them from your package as the instruction is going to go through. And it also really just helps you organize yourself, because Coastal did eventually take this kit and take a few parts out and convert them into a formed piece. And this allowed us to make sure that we had everything that we needed before we moved on to this next step, and that's putting everything together.
It was in the description. This says it was a single part. Come to find out, it is part of the form bumper. Part number one is essentially 1, 3, and 6. These 2 tabs are not labeled separately.
Oh, okay. We're just getting ready to put on the fit up parts. So what you're gonna want to do basically is you're gonna take piece number 2, which is this guy, right? This is what this piece here is your tow hook, and this is what's gonna stick through the bumper when you're doing fit up. And then you always want to keep your instructions handy. Then you're gonna take piece number 1, which is one of those 3 pieces that have changed. Right, this whole piece is now a formed piece instead of being 3 separate pieces that you have to weld. And you're gonna take the side mount, or sorry, the bottom mount, where you've pulled the bolts out for your hitch assembly. You're gonna put those pieces on first, then you're gonna put these pieces on. And this is what's gonna allow you to hook up. These 3 for the sides, and also remember you gotta make sure you grind out these weld-on nubs for the box mount just a little bit, not too much, because you don't want to lose that contact surface. But just keep that in mind. So we're going to go ahead and start putting these pieces on now. Then we'll be able to put the big piece on and kind of fit it and then start packing.
Ooh, that one's snug.
Something to consider when you've reached this point is you're going to be installing brand new hardware in the factory holes that you removed the hardware from before, so they will be a little tight. I would encourage running them in with a ratchet before using any sort of power tools, and that's just going to ensure that those threads can cut their way back in, so that when you get to this point and you're putting the bumper back on, those are nice and really tight, and when you begin tacking things up, things are going to sit exactly where they need to. And you can see here that the clearances were absolutely beautiful.
But everything's
Now that the factory mounting points have been installed for the new bumper and the bumper is placed on there, you're going to start assembling the side wings.
This is where it all really starts coming together. This is where this is a little bit snug.
As I was doing it, I made sure that if we have to, we can cut more. So there you go, guys. That's a big reason why we want to measure twice and cut once. We've got enough material that we can make a cleaner cut to just match the profile of the bumper a little better, or a little higher up on the box, and then we'll get going on the other stuff. Now that number 7 is tacked up in place, you're just going to continue down the list of parts from 7, 8, 9, all the way down to number 11, at which case you're going to do the same thing on the other side. What you're seeing Jordan do here is he's taking some of the corners off of the plates so that when he's tacking these up, he's got a nice solid gap that he can actually fill with beads so that the tack up goes really nice and smooth.
You kind of just like you put your body in weird spots. So right now, I'm gonna like lift my leg, squeeze this, and then by having my leg anchored, I can use my leg to like
off your arm onto the bumper. Yeah.
fulcrums.
Whew, all right, guys, so here we are. We are just finishing up tacking up the bumper. Once the bumper is tacked up, following the procedural outline in Coastal Offroad's instructions, there's still quite a few pieces that we need to tack together. However, they do need to be installed with the bumper removed. So Jordan's got 2 or 3 tacks left to do on the bumper, at which point we're going to remove it, throw it back onto the table, and then the bumper will go back on one more time before coating, but that will be after all of the fine tuning is done. So all of the braces are installed, the hitch receivers installed, and the tow hook reinforcements are installed, or the recovery point reinforcements are reinstalled. Then we'll pull the bumper off, we'll prep it for coating, coat it up, and then put it back on. But there's still a couple of things like the spare tire carrier that has to get assembled and installed. Yeah, let's get this thing off now. All right, so now we're moving on to the tire carrier. You're going to want to follow a very similar process. You're going to want to lay out the parts as best as you can, and then review the instructions as you're fitting it up. You're going to tack this thing together on a table, doing the best you can with what the instructions are going to provide you for information. And then you're going to move it over onto the truck and place the pivot knuckle where you're going to think you're going to want it. Now, it's important that you open your tailgate a couple times and to make sure that your clearances are good before you go full Monty on it. But we did have to make a couple of adjustments to some brackets and some gussets just to make sure that this worked really well. But if you follow the same process for tack up, it shouldn't be very difficult. All right, so here we are. We are positioning our bracket where we think it's probably going to be best to be. There is a nylon spacer that comes in the kit that you're going to want to use for spacing. You're going to see here that we used a couple of metal tabs in there. That ended up not being high enough, so we actually had to break the bracket off and then reposition it with that nylon spacer in there because the bumper is going to want to close on that spacer. So just make sure that you have that spacer in when you're fitting this up, and then bring that pivot as far to either the driver's side or the passenger side, depending on what side you want your tire on. Just past the point where that pivot's not going to interact with that tailgate in any sort of way, but still gives you enough surface area that you can mount your gussets to. All right, guys, so we're just fitting up the spare tire carrier, and the Frontier is a unique little monster when it comes to this stuff, and I'm going to show you why. This is what we got to work with here. So there's not much space to put our pivot hinge here, because we actually can't move it in too much this way, because then we're going to be interfering with the tailgate coming down. So it has to be over enough that it doesn't interact with the tailgate, but at the same time, there's not a ton of material here for the bumper, for this piece. So we're trying to find the best position for the gussets to sit without coming too close to the body line, to the fender line, and but still giving us the maximum amount of structural force, because this thing's going to be bouncing around and all things. So this is if there's anything about this kit that I would change, it's this, because we're relying solely on these gussets to hold this piece of plate steel, and this is very, very thick. It would be nice if there was some sort of thing that came out of here that came up and create a flat surface to mount this to. that's my main concern right now. So as you can see, that's more or less what the angle is going to look like, which isn't ideal, but we need as much of this to be hanging onto this material as possible. So I think we're going to stick with this gusset, keeping this gusset big so that we have as much material to connect to here and here, but we will have to cut that other line, that other one down to fit it inside here. So that's what we're going to do now.
Fast, right? So you just take an extra felt off of him, so you just swap it out while he's up there.
But I think we're gonna get you as much space. Okay, so that's pretty good.
Okay, we're gonna crack into the hardware now. Coastal Offroad actually sends you a really nice locking latch that is designed to lock into place. So we're gonna go through all that hardware and just make sure we're not missing anything. All right, guys, so this is how this is gonna go. This piece is actually supposed to come out further here according to the directions, but when we do that, it brings our pivot point past the material of our bumper. And we don't want that. We want at least this point here to exist somewhere on the material side. So as you can see here, this angle just meets this angle, right? So although these are doing all the work still, some of the load is transferring directly into the bumper. And that's what we wanted. If this were to come out more, we would kind of be hooped, because this eventually, these welds would it's just not super confident for me. And then what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to put, this is a pin latch, a pull pin latch, so it's just kind of friction little, you see that guy going back and forth there? And that's supposed to exist behind here so that when you close this thing, it kind of just hits something and then locks in place and then stops it from opening. And then you use the latch to close it. So this is going to be relocated here, like so, using these pieces here. They're going to get trimmed down, they're going to be put there, and we're going to drill a hole into the bumper and it's going to fit into there. And then we're having to modify this piece here. Jordan's cutting this guy down, and that's going to create a vertical surface so that we can actually mount our latch catch to, which is this guy here. So it'll sit like this, and the latch will actually get attached to this, and then this nylon spacer will be behind here, and that's what's going to catch the bumper and stop it from going any further back. So we're making a couple modifications. We'll show you guys exactly what those look like right away here. Oh yeah, that's nice. Yeah. Yeah. Just a quick reminder about this latch here is where we mark these holes, we actually have to drill those holes out and then weld nuts behind them so that when we go to mount that latch back up after coating, it'll actually tap into those threads. So a couple things to consider when you're getting ready to fire up this weld. You've got all your pieces tacked in place. You've gone through and you've double checked fit up. You got your spare tire carrier all set up and good to go, ready to install. So you're gonna start blasting some welds in there. Something to be mindful about is it's not so well important on the welds that we're gonna do here, but some of the longer ones, you're gonna wanna space out your welds, right? So if you have to do a really long continuous bead, you wanna do your best to make sure that that bead, you take breaks in it. So you go a little bit on this side and then a little bit on the other side, just so you're not gonna warp your material. There's a lot of heat and power that goes into welding, and the heat transfer can warp the material a little bit. The thicker material, the less likely that is, and we are using some pretty thick material here. Jordan, how thick is that?
This is all
3/16. So we're using 3/16 plate steel. So it can warp, but Jordan's a professional. He knows what he's doing. That's why we bring it here. If you guys are doing this by yourself, just keep that in mind. If you're doing a really, really long bead, stretch it out. Do a little bit on this side, go to the other side, do a little bit. Let that material cool down a little bit, and then you'll be able to proceed. But there's a lot of welding to do from this point on. So we're gonna get some shots of it. Jordan's gonna begin the welding process. And then probably tomorrow evening, we're gonna be putting this thing back on the bumper, back on the truck. And we'll go from there. So let's do it. Time to weld.
Take a rip. Sort of do more career wise, like you can do. Couldn't follow them anymore.
That's nice. You got enough there.
There's gonna be a thing is bouncing around on this too. You mentioned like about heat. You're gonna want to bounce around a little bit that way because you don't want to be concentrating too much heat in one specific area. Where there's heat, there's distortion. It's simple as that.
Yeah.
What expands must contract.
Yeah,
So,
that's great.
yeah.
Just physics. So you guys see what he's doing here is he's putting a notch in here so that he can actually lay a bead in here and have the weld fill it, because these plates are so tight together that he's got to put a little bit of space in here just so he can lay his bead in there. A little bit prep. Welds are so fine.
Good chance, guys like Eric and there's a guy at Red Deer who has a shop called Overkill Custom.
Yes, I've.
My way around it. This is totally fine as it is. Here, this thing's coming in for sandblasting here. So, as you can kind of scan around the booth, we're gonna hit this thing to get a blast profile in it. So what we're using here is a blast media called cast iron steel shot. It's definitely aggressive, but scalable. We're gonna reduce the pressure a little bit, so we're gonna have this kind of happy medium of getting a nice sharp blast profile, but a little bit less pressure so that it develops a really nice consistent finish in the powder in the end that way. So this is what we do. As powder coat goes through its curing process, what we're doing here in sandblasting is developing a profile to create an actual mechanical bond. So as we sandblast, the surface of the material goes from a flat profile to all these little mini peaks and valleys. That's what we're developing here, so that as powder gets laid into those peaks and valleys, as it goes through that curing process in the oven, it heats up, expands, becomes liquid, and then it cools and contracts and bites and grabs on to all of those little peaks and valleys.
All right, gang, so here we are. You have your bumpers fully welded. You are pretty well good to go. A couple things we want to make sure that we do before we put the bumper back on. We've got some duplicolor rust fix. This is preemptive. This is just to protect it. So this is basically going to double as a primer. And then we're going to lay some truck bed coating on it. Really strong, really resistant and durable, and less likely to crack. This is under the truck. There's lots of gravel travel that we do, so we want to make sure that we're protecting our paint and surfaces as much as we can. When you've got to about this point, it's really a good idea to just go through there with a grinder before you actually start spraying, and just make sure you don't have any burrs or rough edges under there, because as you see here, we did end up putting a bulb seal on here. This isn't something you have to do, it's something that I decided to do, but that was all done, and then finally we're ready to start coating. So Brody's applying what's called a wrinkle black powder coat texture here. Now the reason we went with powder coating for one is it's a lot more durable than paint. It's less prone to cracking or chipping. And we drive a lot of gravel roads, so that's really important. And then the wrinkle texture just gives it a nice rugged feel. Here we're going to load the tire carrier into the truck. We're going to get the truck back to the shop, and then we're going to wrap up the install, wrap up the video. Then we're going to start editing this video because this video has to go live on Sunday. So, shout out to everybody. Thanks, New Fab.
Yeah, doses.
Doses. All right, guys, we'll see you at the shop. right, let's finish this thing up.
Seemingly lost grip. One of the cables holding the sails to the staircase probe had broken near the orbit of Jupiter. The craft had deviated from its planned path into the endless depths of space.
All right, we're getting really close, guys. So next is you're going to have to cut this spacer down, and that's because we've moved that spare tire carrier closer into the tailgate. So when we drop this tailgate, the tailgate's actually going to hit this spacer. So I've cut it down quite a bit, and then I'm just going to grab the hardware, and I'm going to run those down into those 2 holes that we drilled and tapped, and then I'm going to put a nut underneath to hold it tight.
Evacuated. Humanity invests heavily in space cities. The artificial lights in the city multiplied. Flattened persons took up a lot of space, though still minuscule compared to the vast two-dimensional building.
Now again, the hardware here is really, really nice. This is a spring-loaded latch with a catch, and we've already welded those nuts in the back, so we're just going to go ahead and tighten these nuts up, and then we're going to place this thing onto the bumper after we adjust our Heim joints.
They're still alive. The bumper world received a gravitational wave that would depend on how well.
All right, guys, we've made it to the home stretch. So this is a Heim joint. What we're going to do is you're going to take that Heim joint and you're going to run it into those bolts that you've welded to the back end of that plate on your tire carrier. That's going to hold that big bolt that you see with a centering pin, and that's going to keep the tire carrier straight and true. Trying to install this by yourself can be a little difficult, so just have a little bit of patience, and eventually you will get that bolted down there, and you're just going to tap it through with a hammer, and then the next step is just making sure that your clearances are right. So you're going to want to open it, open it, and close it. Pull that latch tight, make sure that everything's lining up, and then last but not least, you're going to run that kingpin bolt, and you're going to tighten it up with a pair of wrenches. You're going to want to go pretty tight on this because you're not going to want that to back off in any sort of way.
90 kilometers, passing through Young Farm, then to the Frontier's neighbor in the first row, and then through Proffessionally, Antarctica, and Old Road. The fleet still did not.
All right, and that's it. So you've completed the bumper from beginning to end. Congratulations. I am absolutely stoked about how this looks, and I couldn't imagine a better team to do this with. So shout out to Coastal Offroad, shout out to New Fab. This has been an absolutely great. I know it's been a long one, guys, but I appreciate you sticking through. And if you're doing this bumper, this is going to be a perfect video for you to kind of follow if you want to do it just like this.
For nearly 2 centuries, research into space strategy.
Okay, well, everybody, it is the next day. It has been an absolutely chaotic week. It's been super, super busy. I'm absolutely grateful for Jordan over at New Fab, Brody over at New Fab, and Dalton at New Fab for putting in the work and letting me hang out in their shop while they're working and film everything. The bumper is done. The bumper is done, and I've put the spare tire on it for now. Until I figure out what I'm going to do with wheels and tires. I don't know if I'm buying a new set of rims so I can have a matching set. I have a better idea that I'm going to probably do, which is kind of like a tip of the hat to the old European sports cars that I like to run back in the day. But let's take a look at it, guys, so you guys can see it. There she is. Boom. So let's go over the subtle changes that we made while we were designing this from the instructions. So typically this tire carrier is going to sit more so about there, so it's going to be offset from the bumper this way. We wanted to keep it a really stream and sexy line, so we mounted it almost flush with this. So when it's on like that, it kind of follows this line really well. Now that does bring the tire very close to the tailgate, which I'm fine with. We will see if that's going to interfere with the camper once the camper goes on though. And if so, we'll have to probably just space that spare tire out a little bit. But as you can see, we've got so much more clearance underneath, and with that spare tire underneath, moved out to the back here, we've got lots of space underneath that truck, so we're not going to be dragging anymore. But there you go, guys. That is the Coastal Offroad high clearance rear bumper for the Nissan Frontier. It looks really good. So shout out to New Fab, shout out to Coastal Offroad. If you guys want to get one of these bumpers for your truck, I will recommend them 100%. Use Blindman 5 at checkout if you're buying yours, and that's going to save you some cash when you're doing your build. So we'll probably go through a final cost tally a little bit later on a different video as to what this is going to cost us. But with the bumper, the carrier, the welding, and the coating, I'm guessing it's probably going to be close to $2,700. But we'll actually do an accurate count for you guys, and we still have to find a place to mount the license plate, which I think I'm probably going to do right here. Somehow I got to shop some Amazon parts and see what there's available. All right, guys, so that's pretty well gonna do it for this video. I really want to thank you all for coming out and hanging out with us on this build. This is a big fun mod that we did, and without you guys here, it just wouldn't be the same. So shout out to all of you guys. I really want to encourage you to hit that like and subscribe button. It's really the only way to kind of help smaller content creators like us, specifically up in these kind of smaller parts in Canada, kind of rise above the YouTube algorithm and able to reach more people, so we can bring you guys cool content like this, so that you guys can kind of see what you're capable of doing with your Nissan Frontier. There's a lot of us content creators over the last 3 years specifically that have brought in a lot of awareness, not awareness, but just showing what a Nissan Frontier is really capable of. There's lots of cool trucks out there, but it was really only in the last few years where some of us content creators were taking the Nissan Frontier and turning it into our adventure truck, and doing it a little different, because there's lots of Tacomas out there, there's lots of Jeeps out there, but very few of us decided to take the Frontier and kind of turn it into what you see before you here today. And you guys have been part of that journey for a long time, so I want to thank you. That's going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you so much. If you guys want to learn more, or if you want more information on the Coastal Offroad bumper, and you're going to go buy it, use the Blindman discount code Blindman5. That's Blindman5 at discount. It's going to save you some cash coming out. And shout out to Coastal Offroad for offering that to our subscribers here. And yeah, next is just finalizing the Yucatan camper, getting that back installed, and then start planning our trip south of the border down into the States, where we're going to hang out with some friends and meet some people we haven't met yet, and hang out with some people that we haven't met yet, or that we have met so far, and just take a little bit of time. We had an absolutely crazy year this year. Christmas is coming, New Year's is coming, guys. We knocked it out of the park this year, and a lot of that had to do with you guys just supporting the vision and supporting us and me and all that. So thank you. We'll see you guys on the next one. Live free, be wild, have fun.